This is the More Doors podcast. We are back, episode 65. Me, Brian Force, in the house with an amazing guest. We are going to bring sexy back to property taxes right after this. All right, everybody, we are back in action. The boys are back in town. What's up, B-Money? Brian Force?
I'm here. I'm back. Am I on? Oh, my gosh, brother. It is so good.
Dude, the hair is looking superfluous today.
So I'm just going to cut right to it because I appreciate you saying that about my hair, but I figured you might notice if I get close. Do you see this cut on my forehead right here?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
This is like the most Brian story ever. I was in your neck of the woods. I was in Austin over the weekend. Were you down there last week?
Thursday, Friday.
It was way colder than I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
I did not prepare for that. So I ran to Target to grab a hoodie, and I'm trying on a hoodie with it's got one of these really beefy tags on it that's like a business card, And I go into the fitting room and I pull this thing over my head to try it on, and the tag perfectly paper cuts my forehead. And I come out. And my wife just looks at me like, of course, I'd be bleeding after trying on clothes at Target. She didn't even blink. She was so unsurprised. It was almost as if she would have been weirded out if I didn't come out hurt some way.
Wow.
So I've got this fun little gash healing on my forehead.
Dude, I honestly thought you said you were going to say that you ran into a rack.
No, I've done that so many times. I've gotten pretty good at avoiding those now.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had a physical injury at Target. You should definitely try and be more careful.
No, I'll do my
Why don't you walk us through some sponsors, B?
Let's get into it. Let's just jump right in. We're running a little behind today because our producer just vanished. He's checked out because of the Masters. But you know who's not checked out? Jesse Showalter over at Tour Studios. TORE Studios.com, the home of Tour Studios. Jesse over there will hook you up with all of your YouTube, podcast, multimedia content creation needs. So go check out tourstudios.com. And when you're done with that, head on over to deepbluere.com. That's the home of Deep Blue Capital. Go over there, create your investor profile. We got all sorts of educational content on there, and you'll get early access to our upcoming offerings. And let me tell you, the pipeline seems to be filling up again. There are going to be a lot of opportunities we predict in Q3 and Q4 of 2025 and going forward. We're already seeing the dam break a little bit. So make sure you go over to deepbluere.com and create your investor profile so you get an early look at all of our latest offerings.
Well done. It's like, dude, you never skip a beat. You're so impressive.
I practice every day just in case we, ever do the show regularly again. I just want to just like the Navy SEALs, you got to stay frosty.
I hear you. It's good to be back, man. I missed you guys. It's been super busy, but we're gonna get back in action. We got some guests teed up. We just got to get the scheduling together. Mm-hmm. Speaking of guests, we have a whopper for you today, and this guy, he knows his stuff. He's going to help us bring sexy back to the topic of property tax appeals. We're recording this the first week in April 2025. I know I'm not supposed to date it, Jesse, but I think it's important for context because as we speak, the counties across Texas are pulling up dump trucks of tax assessments in envelopes and dumping them in the mail and sending them all to property owners in Texas. And our guest today is going to help us understand what those tax assessments are based on, how they're generated, how that money gets used, and then most importantly, how we can help our listeners and people in Texas and in other states save money on property taxes. So without further ado, let's bring the property tax cowboy in, Sam Sosa from Ownwell. What's up, brother?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Brian. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have to ask a question before we jump in. Did you harm yourself when you were shopping for that hat?
Well, I have several. So at that point, I'd be beaten to death by the collection of hats that I have. But no, this one is actually a gift from my wife. So she's got good taste.
I love it.
Nice, dude. That's
I've
all.
got a better one, and if I don't ask this, I'll just hate myself if I don't get this stupid cheesy joke out. How old were you, and what was your experience like going through the 1998 Major League home run chase?
Well, I don't remember it because 1999 was even more hell of a year, and so yeah, it's
Gotcha.
hindsight's 2020, but yeah.
Kids can be ruthless, and just being named Sam Sosa back when McGuire and Sosa were going at it, I just don't know what that experience would have been like. My last name's Force, so I get a lot of name jokes. So I'm always curious of other people with specific names, what their human experience is like.
Yeah, I still hear it to this day. And so any baseball fanatic will just, jog my brain with it. But it's refreshing from time to time. I can't complain.
Love it.
Just to clarify, Brian's the only one who's heard himself on this show shopping for anything recently.
So far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Sam, why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself to our listeners, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from.
Yeah, howdy. So I'm Sam Sosa. I'm the senior property tax manager at Ownwell. I'm also a licensed senior property tax consultant in Texas. I oversee about 150,000 residential and commercial appeals across 7 states. I've been in the property tax industry for a little over a decade now in various capacities, be it on the administrative side, operations, and now on the consulting side. And prior to working at Ownwell, I worked at the largest property tax consulting firm in the United States. And while I was there, I specialized in commercial property tax appeals. Currently, I am based in beautiful Austin, Texas.
Love it.
Love it. Let me also put Sam on the spot. Sam and his lovely wife welcomed their baby boy into the world, 6 weeks ago now, Sam?
Yeah, he's 2 months old today.
Amazing. Amazing.
Congratulations, brother. That's awesome.
I've got to say his name out on the airwaves so he can listen to it one day. So, Bo, shout out, little man. You're 2 months old today, and hope you listen to this when you're older.
Awesome.
One last thing about Sam before Brian kicks us off with some questions. Sam is one hell of a kickball player. Like he is. You got to see this guy in the field. He is like a kickball ninja out there. He's got the headband on. He's fully garbed out, and he is definitely part of the AKAA, the American Kickball Association of America. So, Sam, it's always great to watch you on the field, brother.
I don't have many hobbies. I got to be good at something.
All right, awesome. B, why don't you kick us off?
Matt always does such a great job laying out kind of questions to guide the conversation. I'm just going to totally circumvent him and jump to my favorite at the end. We have had obviously a volatile market as far as asset values are concerned, from let's just say peak in 2022 to where we are currently, early 2025. Being on the tax appeal side, how much this is something that sometimes, I think we all work into our cadence appealing our taxes every year if we think that our valuations are off. But I think right now, what a difference we're seeing in asset valuations on the tax side from 3 years ago. Just give us an insight on how drastic tax valuations are looking from their peak mid 2022 to where you see them specifically on the multifamily side here in 2025. Has it been what kind of percentage difference are we looking at?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, both on the commercial and residential side, the market write-up up to 2022 was absolutely insane. Ownwell was a much smaller company at that time, small but mighty. And even on the appeals that we were seeing across the board, increases like 30, 40, 50%. We saw properties increase as much as 100, 200%. And so, at that time, we didn't have things like the circuit breaker in place to help mitigate some of those year-over-year increases. And so we saw that going into 22 and then a little into 23, where it started to level out. And now we're in 2025. And so we've seen values come down quite a bit, but I think the county is really just holding off. We've seen a number of values that are just rolled over. And I think we're just like in this holding pattern where it's like, where's the market going to go from here? But regardless, the values from what I can see are still inflated.
Yeah. So you use that kind of keyword inflated there. Is that a bit of a maybe forecast that we still have some room to go down in tax valuations?
Most definitely. I mean, and you said it yourself, like we get in this habit of protesting year over year, as I would encourage any property owner to do, be it residential or commercial property. Even if you're capped, it doesn't matter. Go in there, protest, open up the packet and see what the county is using to value your property on. Because, more often than not, I mean, this business exists because of that. It's because we find the errors and we correct them. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like values are still inflated. They haven't come down as much as they need to. And, the counties are faced with an extremely difficult job, right? All credit to them. And they have to evaluate hundreds of thousands of properties in some counties. And so, with limited resources, things like that, they have to use, statistical models to derive values that they put on the assessment rolls. And so in this, there are assumptions made, right? We look at averages, medians, stabilized rates, things like that. And in these assumptions, we derive values. Well, those assumptions don't always hold true in the real world. And so I always think that there is opportunity for the value to be corrected. Yes.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point that you make around the assumptions that are made. I'm curious on the appeals that you guys are having a lot of success on are tax valuations coming down specifically in the commercial or multifamily space? Because, on the residential side, my value is based on comparable sales. My saleable value on a commercial or multifamily property is based on my NOI divided by the cap rate. And so when you guys are appealing, are you seeing that the assumptions that are being made regarding tax values are not in alignment with, say, occupancy levels or rental rates or concessions or things that are driving NOI downward?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. So, we'll take income, for example, on the commercial side. One of the approaches to value that the county will use is called the income approach. And pretty much what they do or how they're able to derive these figures are, in Q1 of every year, that's typically like the data gathering phase. Counties will send out surveys to commercial property owners saying, hey, like, share your financials with us, help us build out our models and get the value more accurate. But as you can imagine, most owners will see that and be like, the hell with it. That's confidential information. I'm not going to share that with the government. And so they tend to, they tend to hold those, and then they'll hire, folks like Ownwell to be the, a mediary between them and the county. And so, I mean, but as I was saying, you hit it right on the head. In these assumptions, in the limited data that they're able to gather, they have to derive what's called a stabilized figure. They have to put 95% occupancy generally is what you'll see like on the multifamily side, 90 to 95%. And we know that always isn't the case, right? And expenses change year over year. So OPEX could be high last year, low this year. I mean, like, these things are not constant. One thing that is certain is that they are changing. And so that's what's great about hiring a consultant, is that experienced professionals can go through your financials and see, where is the difference between what the county has versus what they have, derive their own model, and then aggressively pursue that at the hearing, which is what, the folks here at Ownwell do.
Man, it's super insightful. And as far as that process goes, I think it'd be really good to have a little bit of context for anybody who's a syndicator, or maybe you own a small portfolio who's trying to do some of this stuff on your own, or maybe not doing it at all. Give us the idea of the workload that you're taking off of the investors or the syndicators' plates by being the consultant, being that intermediary, and your success rate. Like, obviously, it's a massive savings to have a lower taxable asset value. But what does it look like? I mean, when we talk about the leverage you provide to investors, take us kind of through the elevator pitch on what you guys actually do day to day, and the load that you take off an investor, what they would have to do on their own to accomplish the same result.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, it's a very good question. In a nutshell, we provide end-to-end tax appeal services with a variety of other products that are available to any home or business owner. And so, one thing that I would say is that, the most important thing that you can't ever get back is time. And so as these folks that do have, several properties, even going up into your large institutional investors, it takes a lot of time to manage, to gather data on all these properties, to build a sales comparison approach. And so that's what Ownwell does. We have numerous consultants with a combined experience of over 500 years on staff. And you think about that, that's 500 years of relationships that were built with the county in total. That's experience that consultants have gone through and done thousands and thousands of appeals and got to know the way that the district does things and the way that the appraisal review board operates, because none of those two things are created equal. Each district is different. Each appraisal review board is different, and they have their own preferences, so on and so forth. And so as you get into your multi-prop owners and things like that, even for the folks, the everyday folks that have one property, you can't get back that time. Typically it's a laborious process, right? You have to fill out paperwork, you have to file the protest, and hopefully you file with the correct reasons. And if you don't, well, it changes the whole basis of the protest. And then you have to engage in that communication with the county. And so a lot of folks don't have time to manage that inbound, depending on how active the appraiser is on email or via phone. Some of us work for a living. We don't have time to be able to pick up the phone in the middle of the day and try and negotiate a home value, right? And that's where folks like Ownwell come in and step in on your behalf. We save the property owners a lot of time, because it tends to drag out if you don't decide to settle at that first round, right? We're going to take it to formal. We're going to try and get the best possible value that is supported by data. And if we're unsuccessful at the formal, we'll escalate it. We'll take it to either arbitration or litigation based on an extensive further review, to try and continue to push down those savings or get you the result that we think is warranted. And so it might have been a long-winded answer, but I think it's important to note that, everybody works. We all have things going on in our lives, and saving these folks time and money is like the 1-2 punch. And so that's why folks like Ownwell exist, and we're happy to serve folks that want to appeal, and it's a privilege to be able to do so.
Love that. It's so, Brian, this is a real story, right? You talk about what's the process. And look, there's a lot of folks out there that either don't protest their taxes, or some of them try and do it themselves. And our friend Scott, you know who I'm talking about, right? Like Scott's been in the technology world, infrastructure development. Like, he designs servers for a living for one of the big tech companies. Scott, last couple of years, Scott pings Vanessa a couple of times, asking her to pull comps for his house. Then he sits down and he pulls the evidence packet, right? And then he takes a half a day off of work from his big tech company job to go down to the court to go through his appeal. And I'm like, Scott, is that really the highest and best use of your time? And then on top of all that, right, you don't know if you're about to My Cousin Vinny this thing and walk into a courtroom and you don't know the process or the procedure or how to address the court, right, whatever, and all of a sudden you step on yourself. And what's the opportunity cost for you to go do that on your own, let alone, are you getting yourself the best possible outcome versus hiring someone like Ownwell or Sam or someone on his team that are proven professionals that have done this tens of thousands of times and have the process down and just know what to look for and what to do. So, I think there's a huge opportunity cost there, especially as you start to get into larger portfolios like ours or, some of our other friends.
Yeah.
I did want to come back to one thing that you asked before, Brian, about, kind of this part of the market cycle and get Sam's thoughts on it. But before we do that, right, Sam, like the whole concept of property taxes, like, why do we have property taxes, and how are they determined?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one I love answering, because as obvious as it may seem to some, it's not to others. And so, nobody's really going to go out of their way to research property taxes, because, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, it's not that sexy to look into. And so, at its core, the local property tax is the largest single funding source for community services. So you think of the state government receives no benefits from these local taxes. These taxes are paid to public schools. They're used for, repaving of city streets, county roads. They're used to, provide funds to police departments, fire protection, and many other vital programs. And tax rates aren't held constant. They are subject to change, which would then, make that downstream impact of your tax bill being effective positively or negatively. And so at its core, that's really what the property tax is. Texas has no state property tax. And so it's important to note that the property tax is local and it's collected locally and administered locally.
Love it. Okay. So, we talk about assessments going out right about now, which is the county's version of the value of your home. And then later on this year, we're going to get bills or tax bill for those properties, whether it's residential all the way up through, commercial properties. So why am I getting an assessment now telling me the value of the property, but I'm not getting the bill until November 1st?
Yeah, it's essentially to allow property owners to voice their concerns on what the value is that the county assigned. And so that's why it's extremely important to, and I encourage everyone to go and protest, even if the value stayed the same, even if it went down, it doesn't matter. Go in and protest and make sure that, what you're seeing is actually supported and is correct. And so, the district is tasked with valuing property as of January 1, assigning that market value. And then they will then take those values post appeal season or once they're certified, and then hand those values over to the entities to adopt the budgets, the rates, and things like that. And so that delay is really to allow for the appeal season to run its course, to allow folks to protest, to voice their concerns, and then ultimately, fight for the value that they think is right. And so that's why we see that delay. And typically tax bills will go out generally around October 1.
Gotcha. Now, how do taxes align with the budgets, right? So when I see my tax bill, I typically see like a bunch of them. They all come at the same time. It's like one of the more depressing days of the year. There's usually like 5 or 6 different line items. There's the school district, there's the hospital, there's a couple other things. So, how are the monies, like how is the tax bill determined and how are those funds ultimately distributed?
Yeah, so ultimately, it's going to come down to budgetary needs. And so that will be determined by these local governments. And essentially what they're looking to do is determine, whether or not the school district or city per se needs to cover more expenses or give more revenue. In those cases, it may raise the tax rate. And conversely, if the expenses decrease or there are surpluses, they may lower the rate because they have access to those additional monies. And so that's typically how the levers work and why, tax rates may be higher one year and lower the last. A good example of this is, I believe it was last year, Austin and Proposition A led to increased property tax rates. And this money was used to fund teacher salaries and school improvements. And so, and especially important on the commercial side, for those that don't qualify for the circuit breaker, things like that, these folks may have felt the effects of those burdens more acutely than others. Based on those increased tax rates. And so that's essentially why rates will change. Now, generally, outside of unique cases like Proposition A, you may see minimal year-over-year change in tax rates. And so, if you're familiar with Truth and Taxation, you can go and see what last year's rate was as opposed to this year, so on and so forth. And you'll see that generally they don't stray too far from one another, with the exception of things like a proposition being passed or something like that.
Gotcha.
You mentioned, Sam, a couple of times now the circuit breaker. Could you give us a breakdown, just kind of a general idea of what that means and how that operates?
Yeah, so the circuit breaker was passed as part of the property tax package from the last legislative session in 2023. It was under the guise of Prop 4 that hit the ballot box in November. And along with that package, you saw increased homestead exemption and rate compression. But the circuit breaker was this new concept. While it's not called a cap, it essentially operates in the same way as a cap. So take homestead properties, for example. You have a market value and you have the capped taxable value. That taxable value for homestead cannot go up more than 10% year over year. So it gives those homeowners some comfort and predictability on where that value is going to land next year, at least in terms of the taxable one. Now, that same concept was applied to commercial properties, particularly small businesses that are valued at 5 million or less. And so the statute says that if you're valued at 5 million or less and you own the property as of, I believe it was January 1, 23 or 24, you are placed in the circuit breaker. Essentially what it means is that the taxable value cannot increase more than 20% year over year. And so while that's still a steep amount, it does provide some, worst case scenario budgeting for small business owners for that next fiscal year. And so I'm under the impression that this was like a knee-jerk reaction to the run-up in 22 and 23, that the legislator acted and tried to say, okay, we need to extend some type of relief to small business owners because they are feeling these burdens more than others. And so that's essentially what the circuit breaker is. There's some, it can get complicated in terms of like if you sell your property, the circuit breaker will fall off and it's not eligible until that owner owns the property for a full year and then until that next valuation date of January 1. And so there's some implications on, selling the property. And the most important thing to note here is that the circuit breaker is temporary. It's set to expire at the end of 2026. So these savings that small business owners are seeing right now aren't going to last forever. And so it's really like, I hope that this resonates with folks that have property valued under 5 million or less, because they need to prepare for the future and prepare for this circuit breaker to not be renewed. Albeit they are talking about a new version of the circuit breaker right now at the legislature, but we don't know if that's even going to come to fruition, things like that. And so really, heads up for property owners that, and this isn't just commercial, it's non-homestead properties as well. So folks that own several rental properties, it qualifies for those too. And that's unique individual value, not collective value under 5 million. And so that's another important distinction to make, but really great relief and some predictability for those multi-prop small business owners looking into the future. But again, it expires at the end of 2026 and 2027 values will go back up to 100%. And so we will see increased tax burdens across the board.
Yeah, really, really good actionable insight. If I'm looking at buying a $4 million multifamily asset this year, that I have to own it for a year before I'm even eligible. And then by the end of that year, it might not renew. So in my underwriting, I've got to be prepared for a pretty significant tax increase that I probably otherwise wouldn't have had in my models. That's very good insight.
Awesome. Another term that comes up a lot, Sam, when we talk about taxes is this concept of equal and uniform. So can you walk our listeners through that? Yeah.
So essentially, equal and uniform is a remedy, and you may hear the county refer to this as the equity approach. Agents may refer to it as the equity approach. And so for property tax purposes, if I say equity, think equal and uniform, not equity I have in my property based on loan and things like that. And so that's an important distinction to make because it does cause some confusion. And so I'll preface equity by saying that there are three accepted approaches to value: sales comparable, income approach, and cost approach. Now we have this other remedy available to property owners called equal and uniform. This is extended to us through the Constitution, through the property tax code, and it essentially says that you cannot be taxed higher than your neighbor. So what we do is we look at comparable properties in that same neighborhood or in that same market area that have similar characteristics but haven't sold. So that's the important distinction between equity and sales, is that sales, we're going to look at that last year of market data of properties that have sold and derive an opinion of value based on that. But for equity, we're looking at just comparable properties where they're currently valued and that have not sold. And so if we see that the subject property is here and all the others are here, we see that there's an opportunity to remedy that value and bring it down to where it needs to be. And that really drives the point home to even folks that are heavily capped, like on the homestead side for principal homeowners. Even if there's no opportunity to get below the cap, you still deserve to have your market value in line with everybody else's. Don't be that comp that gets used to increase the values year over year. Bring that value down and make sure you're where you need to be.
Yeah, that's really good. That's where my head was just going right there. It's a very neighborly thing to do because
Exactly.
if you're the one comp that never protests and stands out, you're setting a precedent for the rest of the neighborhood that's going to be
Exactly.
measured against. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Nice. So, Sam, I opened up the show talking about how Ownwell is bringing sexy back, right? And I use that term actually throughout my interview process, and I think Colton got a chuckle out of it a few times. But my own 2 cents aside, you and your team are literally on the front lines of the outcomes that we're able to achieve for our customers. Like, so when you think about what Ownwell does differently, how would you articulate that for our listeners?
One way that I even sell this role to folks that I interview for the position is I'm saying, like, we really have optimized the role of the property tax consultant. And so I know, even coming from, one of our previous competitors and things like that, they put a lot of stress on the consultants to do a lot of things outside of actually evaluating the property, which is arguably their most important function in that role. And so we've got the best engineers on board. We've got the best support staff. And what they do is they remove all of that other workload that typically would fall on the consultants, and they take that. It's been automated. It's been put on rails. So that way I can trust that my consultants, can focus 100% on getting and valuing the property as accurately as it can be valued. And combining that with all the data we have available at our fingertips, it's a really optimized and streamlined process. And, we do provide that end to end. And so I would say that not only have we optimized and automated where we could and are embracing these changes to technology and leveraging AI as this sophisticated co-pilot, we're doing it at a fraction of the cost compared to the competition. And so I won't name drop anybody, but there are firms out there that charge upwards of 35, 40, 45, 50%, even some that charge a filing fee. It doesn't cost you anything to file a protest, but some of these firms have moved to that model of, requiring a filing fee. We're not going to do that. Our mission is to make the cost of real estate ownership more clear and equitable. And by doing that at a fraction of the cost, we're able to democratize access to real estate expertise. So regardless of status, regardless of class, regardless if you own a mobile home or a 10-story multifamily property, you should have access to these tools and be able to protect your investment with confidence. And that's what we offer our customers, and would love to offer it to as many more as they feel would, think Ownwell is a good fit for them. And so I may have been a bit long-winded there, but I can really talk about the importance of finding somebody that's really passionate and, and is helping their customers in a way that Ownwell is.
Yeah, that's really, really, really great insight. And I think I've actually heard Colton talk a little bit about this before on a web stream that we did together. One of the reasons that I think, if I was, we mentioned one of our friends before that always does his own protests, and you mentioned something, Sam, a little earlier that kind of struck a chord. Every county operates a little bit differently. There's nuances. They have their own style, their own relationships, their own ways of thinking. How does Ownwell manage that at scale? Meaning get to kind of know what the different counties are about, how to work within the systems and the parameters. Like, how do you create more of a personalized approach at scale with all the territory that you cover?
Yeah, I think it speaks in a couple of different ways. One, obviously, communication is the most important. The PTC operations team has an incredible partnership with our support operations team and the other folks that are stakeholders in the process that will help build support around these nuances. The other thing to consider here is that we're not hiring, rookies to go out and do these protests. We have experienced folks that are locally, they're located local to the counties that they service, and that have built those relationships, do understand those nuances that the counties require. They then take that information, translate it for our support operations team, who are then able to build support around it to ensure that even as much as we continue to scale, we are being mindful and aware of the changes between these counties. And so that just speaks to how much we're embracing technology combined with local expertise. Like those two things are powerful enough to, take this thing to the moon, to represent as many customers as we have at the very high level of execution that we've been able to provide. And so I would, it's multi-pronged. I would just say communication, understanding those expectations from the county, building support around it, and we execute at a very high level. And we have a lot of systems in place to make sure that things don't fall between the cracks.
That's excellent, man. Really, really, really insightful approach.
Hey, Sam, I have a theory on something that, and I know I want to be conscious of time here, that this one will probably be a little bit of a longer POV type question, but my own thesis on this is that, actually, let me rewind that a little bit. So we're sitting in this studio probably better part of 2 years ago, and our third partner, Nick, comes in. He's got the vein on his forehead pulsing out of control. He had just gotten the tax assessment for one of his properties in Denton, and like he was doing the math on how much he'd have to raise rent in order to just cover the tax bill, and he was trying to figure out what to do to say it fairly cleanly. So we saw tax bills shoot up, to your point, in 2022 and into 2023. It's like the government realized that COVID was over. Property values had skyrocketed, and now it's the time to chase the taxes. But now we're in a completely different part of the market cycle, right? And, residential, I think, has kind of topped out. Commercial is a little all over the place. You have some properties that are performing well, some that have been hit with occupancy issues, bad debt, insurance going through the roof. So the NOI picture today is a lot different than it was when it was a year ago or even 2 years ago. So my thesis, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is that the appeals that commercial owners file this year will probably be the most important in the last couple of years, because when appeals were done a year ago, so 2024, 2023 was kind of a mixed bag year. The first half was okay. The second half, not so much. And 2024 for a lot of folks out there that we know was a much rougher year. So when you put your financial package for your 2025 appeal, they're going to show the full story of what happened in 2024. So do you think there's an opportunity for folks that perhaps didn't have the best 2024, or their NOI outlook or realizations from 2024 were different than 2023, to use those to their advantage in 2025? And if so, how do you suggest they do that?
I definitely think so, Matt. And arguably every year is just important as the next. But speaking about this year, if property owners are suffering, if their financials are suffering, one of the things I say the most is a property tax is one of the highest, if not the highest line item on an operating statement that business owners will see. And so they're faced with that, burden every year of trying to account for, how am I going to budget for this next year? What do I budget for this next year? Right. And then with circuit breaker on the heels of the expiration date, building up that more uncertainty. And so I would say that, yes, it is important. And what you can do is the county is ultimately going to want to see some financial history over the past couple of years. And that's extremely important, because we're held to derive value from generally accepted methods and procedures, right? So using the income approach, you're going to use financial data to actually put those numbers in and then derive your opinion of value. And so if owners have been seeing just a crazy last few years, I would dig into historical financials, maybe go 2 or 3 years back, try and determine, what it is that is happening with your property. Create your income approach, which essentially is just, potential gross income minus vacancy, effective gross minus operating expenses, and then you apply the cap rate on the NOI. And so that is a very short version of what an income approach is. And so, do your research, look at cap rates of properties that have sold. If you have access to things like that, look at your financial history based on operating statements, look at your rent roll. Where has the vacancy been? the collection of these things will help you paint a really clear picture for you, for the appraisal review board, and for the district come that time to tell the story of what exactly is happening and why you deserve or why this type of value decrease is warranted. And so those are the most important things. The same is true for the sales approach. If we're seeing a flat market, if we're seeing asset prices that are coming down, the market is going to reflect that. So will the data. And so if you pull comps from your same market area, package those all together, make sure they're similar in characteristics, and then present those to the county so they can tell that story as well. Because at the end of the day, we have to remember that counties are working with limited data, especially on the commercial side. And so, we always see this, that, counties will pull not just 1 year back, but maybe 2 or 3 years back to look at the sale history, because they just don't have enough for that prior year and a big enough sample size to warrant the values for the next year. And so that's why it's important to, if you're doing it yourself, gather all your financials, your rent roll, things like that, and package it in a way that is going to be digestible for the ARB or the appraisal district, and also look at the sales. Or if you just don't have the time, again, that's why we exist. We would be happy to do that on your behalf. It can be time consuming, it can be laborious. And so we just want to save folks time and ultimately money. But yeah, Matt, it's extremely important. And I think folks, even if they're on the fence, like, I strongly encourage them to protest, even if the value went down, because, as we talked about before, assumptions are made in these models that spit out the values. Well, those models are different than what's actually happening in the real world, and we need to account for those changes.
Love it. Love it. So do I have any risk if I'm an owner, right, that it maybe isn't familiar with the income approach or anything? Do I have any risk in sharing my financials with Ownwell or another tax appeal company in the attempt, or in the spirit of getting my property taxes lowered?
So we definitely take customer information very seriously and treat it with the highest levels of confidentiality. And so I can confidently say that that transmission of data between customers and the representatives from Ownwell is treated and as sensitive and as such. And in that transmission to the appraisal district, in the event that those documents will help you, we will make sure a smooth handoff and secure handoff, so that way we ensure that extended level of confidentiality. But here's the most important thing. While it can be uncomfortable for folks to share this data or their financials with consultants, it's important to note that I take my fiduciary responsibility very seriously. And if after combing through the financials and what you've given me, if it would negatively impact your value, meaning it would cause it to go up or anything contradictory to what I would want, I won't furnish that information. I take that very seriously, and we have that same expectations for all of our consultants. And so we do treat it as confidential, extremely sensitive, and those hands-off or those transmissions between stakeholders is secure. And so rest assured, your financials aren't sitting on my desk. They're in a protected folder, they're locked away, and things like that. And so we can guarantee our folks that they're protected in that regard.
Got it. But I think what I heard you say was you'll look at the financials, right? If they help the cause, great. If they don't help the cause, then we won't use them.
Exactly.
Right. So you're looking really very early on at the best possible methodology, the best possible model, really kind of painting the picture early on for what's the best path forward for the customer.
Exactly. And we're not just married to the income approach. If the income doesn't work out, we'll chase sales. If the sales doesn't work out, we'll go equity. If the equity doesn't work out, we'll do cost, right? If not cost, highest and best use. So there's a variety of avenues that we have at our disposal, and our consultants will aggressively pursue each one of those to determine which one is going to result in the best possible result for the customer.
Amazing. I think we're coming up on time here, pal. You got any final questions for Sam?
Man, that's just been
Been just a fantastic breakdown, brother. And my final question would have been one you already really touched on, right? Is basically what is the downside to not taking action, especially in this market? And the downside is that, one, your tax saving is not going to be there, but also you become a negative comp most likely for the market. And so this is a situation where we all need to work together to rebalance after what's been, a really volatile last couple of years. So if it's something where there's just no reason not to use your own time and energy when you have professionals that'll save you not only a heck of a lot of money, but a heck of a lot of headaches. If you're an operator out there and you're listening, I just don't know why you wouldn't reach out to Ownwell and get that process started.
Yeah, exactly. And if I can provide one last touch point on how this is no risk at all to folks, protesting, is that by law, your value can't be increased as the result of a protest. And so if you go in, no matter what you provide, the worst thing that can happen is that the value is just going to stay the same. That's why there is zero risk to protest, and it just doesn't make sense to why folks wouldn't. And so regardless if it's DIY, if you go with another consultant, or whether you go with Ownwell, I just want folks to feel empowered and know their rights to be able to be successful regardless of who does the appeal.
Absolutely, brother. That's fantastic advice. I actually didn't, I think I knew that, but I never really heard it articulated like that. So it's obviously it's a no lose situation. So if you haven't done it already, or that isn't part of your normal cadence as an operator, make sure you work that in and you protest every year.
The one thing I did want to pile on there too is, speaking of no risk from an assessments perspective, Sam very clearly articulated that he and his team, they do a lot of work to start thinking about outcomes, which models are going to be most effective, looking at comps, leveraging the technology, so on and so forth, right? Ownwell operates on a complete success fee model only, right? We get no money up front from our customers. So when you come in the door and you sign up with Ownwell, right, Sam and his team go to work on putting all this data together, putting their cases together, striving for an outcome. And it's only once the outcome's been delivered, right, do you get a bill from Ownwell, right? So there's no financial risk. There's no upfront cost to get this started. And if your assessment can't go up, it's silly not to take every opportunity to try and save yourself some money. And B, I think you and I and Nick have talked about this a number of times, at least in the commercial space with multifamily. Cap rates aren't 5% like they once were a couple of years ago, but even at a 6 or 7 cap, $1 is worth 16 times that on the balance sheet. So for every $1 that you can save on expenses, or every additional $1 you can make on your revenue line, that's got an exponential impact on your equity, your balance sheet, and your ability to return capital to your investors. So this seems like a supernatural play. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I chose to bet my career on Ownwell, because it's the people, it's the process, and it's the technology. And I think it's, absolutely lethal. And look, the results speak for themselves. We're preparing to do what, Sam, we did 350,000 appeals last year, and we're gearing up to handle up to 1 million this year.
Yep, that's correct.
Right. So, the numbers match the performance, and it's just been it's been an amazing ride.
It's fantastic, man. Love that. So make sure you get your appeals done if you haven't already. Sam, really, really appreciate the time, brother. We'll have to have you back after tax season and see what new insights we've gained for sure.
Yeah.
Sam, where can people find you?
Obviously I'm on LinkedIn. I think the most important takeaway here is, go to ownwell.com/commercial. Whichever your property type is, we have an amazing sales team that can accommodate you, along with a very easy sign up flow. And so no matter which way you go, you're going to be taken care of. If you have any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn, Sam Sosa, first and last name. Shout at me, happy to help in any way I can. And if not, reach out to any one of these guys, and I'm sure they can get a hold of me. So it's been an absolute privilege to be able to share all this information with y'all. And I hope, folks feel empowered to go out there and fight their taxes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the time, brother. Really appreciate you jumping on the show.
Yeah.
Also, thank you to Tour Studios, TORE Studios.com, Jesse Showalter for all your multimedia podcast, YouTube content creation needs. And then make sure you check out Deep Blue Capital or deepbluere.com, the home of Deep Blue Capital, after you check out ownwell.com or ownwell.com/commercial. Any last words, Booch?
Dude, I'm just excited to be back in the seat, man. It's been a little bit. I'm excited to get this episode out there. Sam, thanks so much. And stay tuned, everybody. We're going to be back in a big way.
Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Everybody.